For a decade and a half, she cleaned their floors, and then she entered the conference room and dismissed the chief executive. Everyone addressed her as Miss Denise, not Denise Jenkins, not the woman from the accounting department, not Mrs. Jenkins as she would have preferred, simply Miss Denise, the custodian. Each morning at 5:45, well before the office illumination activated and the sales staff began boasting about their latest deals, she had already arrived. She navigated a noisy cart beyond the frosted glass entrances of Creswell Holdings. Her gray work clothes had lost their color through the years, and her tennis shoes had become flat from traversing that structure countless times. A cloth remained tucked in her pocket, accompanied by a quiet expression and a steady pace, as though she had performed this work eternally. And in some ways, she had. 15 years, a decade and a half of gathering wadded napkins from meeting rooms, collecting candy wrappers from the break area floor, and removing smudges from elevator controls that seemed perpetually dirty. For most employees in that workplace, she faded into the surroundings like background decoration. When she occupied a space, they conversed around her, past her, as if she were transparent, except for a handful of considerate individuals, mainly trainees or temporary workers who hadn't yet discovered that ignoring her existence was embedded in the workplace atmosphere. However, Denise harbored no resentment, at least initially. She maintained focus, remained silent, and observed. She absorbed the amusement from executive offices, caught conversations people assumed weren't worth hushing, heard the jokes, witnessed the arrogance, observed the deception. She discovered everything necessary simply through a cleaning tool and attentive listening. Once, a marketing representative placed a complete sandwich atop the waste container rather than disposing of it properly. Denise retrieved it and discarded it without comment. He passed by without expressing gratitude, merely glanced at her and instructed, "Ensure the flooring is dry before the 3 o'clock conference." She grinned and acknowledged him. The following day, he spilled his beverage on that identical flooring and blamed her for inadequate cleaning. She acknowledged him once more. It wasn't her first experience with such treatment, nor would it be her final one. Down on level 4, one of the executive vice presidents, Douglas Fairbanks, boisterous and perpetually reeking of fragrance, once chuckled with his aide, remarking, "Could you picture laboring here your entire career without even possessing a workspace?" She overheard him. He was indifferent. He was unaware of her identity. None of them were. That structure was filled with individuals who believed their position granted them worth, who assumed respect required earning through quarterly objectives and 10 o'clock conferences that should have been electronic messages. They were unaware that Denise didn't require their approval because Denise possessed more of that corporation than anyone in that structure, but she hadn't revealed this to anyone. Not yet. As she guided her cart past the executive suites that morning, stopping to clean a glass partition where someone's fingerprints had smeared the corporate emblem, her phone vibrated quietly in her pocket. One message, just a single statement. "We're prepared when you are." She returned the phone to her pocket, her face unreadable. Then she continued forward, but this time she wasn't merely sanitizing floors. She was advancing towards something, and nobody anticipated it. Before Denise ever grasped a cleaning tool in that structure, she sat at a dining table in Columbus, Georgia, examining business proposals with her spouse, Roland Jenkins. That was during the time when Creswell Holdings wasn't even a title yet, just a concept written on a grocery receipt's reverse side. Roland possessed determination, that type of natural drive that couldn't be taught. He'd matured working his uncle's transport vehicles, traveling routes, across Alabama and South Carolina. He understood logistics thoroughly before it was ever termed a supply chain. Denise, conversely, was the intelligence operating behind the scenes. She didn't speak much publicly, but she possessed a keen method of examining problems, quietly analyzing situations and identifying what didn't belong. In 1998, Rowland and an associate named Curtis Banning gathered sufficient funds to establish a freight brokerage with merely one leased office space, 2 mobile phones, and a fax machine that barely functioned. Denise was the initial investor. Her father had bequeathed her a modest inheritance upon his passing, a life insurance settlement most people would have utilized for a house down payment. But Denise had an alternative plan. "Register it under your identity," she instructed Rowland one evening. "I'll remain behind the scenes. Nobody requires knowledge of my involvement." He observed her across the table and inquired, "Are you certain?" "I understand what I'm undertaking," she responded, "and I have faith in you." During the subsequent 6 years, the company grew dramatically. Curtis managed networking, Rowland oversaw operations, and Denise monitored every dollar. She maintained the financial records, completed paperwork, assisted in contract preparation under a separate LLC she established just in case. It was her method of protecting both of them. But Rowland failed to protect himself. In 2004, an accident on Interstate 85 claimed his life too early. A late-night delivery trip, an exhausted driver, an overturned trailer. Gone in moments. Curtis delivered a feeble speech at the funeral, all business barely acknowledging Denise. That was the initial warning sign. The second occurred weeks later when Curtis submitted documents eliminating Rowland's name and quietly excluded Denise from all internal communications. He assumed she would vanish. But Denise possessed evidence, legal documentation from the very beginning that granted her equal ownership of Rowland's portion. And beyond that, she had influence. She could have pursued legal action, could have entered that office with attorneys and demanded control immediately. But instead, she waited. Because Denise understood the distinction between power and timing. She remained silent. No media, no correspondence, just silence. Then, in 2007, a job posting appeared on a community bulletin in Montgomery for nighttime custodial personnel at Crestwell Logistics. She circled it. 2 days later, she arrived with a fabricated resume, a borrowed address, and new work footwear. She received the position immediately. Curtis never identified her, not once, and by that period, he wasn't even managing the establishment anymore. A new name was circulating, Thomas Wexler, young MBA from Florida State. He knew nothing about the company's foundation, but understood how to dress like a chief executive. Denise maintained her focus, continued appearing one evening at a time, one level at a time. 15 years, every waste container she cleared, every restroom she cleaned. It wasn't merely maintenance, it was observation. She listened, watched, waited, and preserved every single document. But eventually, what you conceal surfaces, and Denise was nearly finished excavating. By the 10th year, Denise knew every inch of Crestwell's headquarters in Birmingham, Alabama. She knew which corridor had the loose plank, which microwave sparked when closed forcefully, and which directors regularly used corporate cards for personal meals. She no longer needed to speculate. She knew precisely what was occurring. Crestwell had transformed from a close-knit logistics company to a cold, inflated operation where upper management sat behind glass barriers, spouting terminology while frontline employees were barely surviving. She'd observe warehouse drivers arrive with aching backs, carrying overtime forms that never seemed to receive approval. She'd hear the HR staff whisper about reducing health benefit expenses, and repeatedly she witnessed middle management being escorted out, terminated without notice for protocol violations. One of them, a man named Terrence Doyle, made the error of addressing salary disparities in a staff meeting. He was dismissed within a week. Denise was invisible in those spaces. No one filtered their words around her. Initially, she merely listened. But then she began documenting. She maintained a small black notebook inside her locker, concealed behind a plastic bag of spare gloves. It contained names, dates, quotes, who said what when they said it, and who witnessed it. If you examined the pages, you'd discover entries like February 14th. We can reduce the bonus pool for lower staff. They'll accept what we provide them. Wexler to CFO, room 508. June 3rd. Warehouse safety violation ignored. Man slipped, no documentation filed. Brenda witnessed it. August 19th. Heard Wexler state, let the custodian handle it. That's her compensation. I was present. It wasn't resentment driving her. It was clarity. She observed a company drowning in arrogance. One evening around 1:45 Denise paused her cart outside the 6th floor executive area. The corridor was dark except for illumination from the main conference room. She heard laughter inside. Wexler's voice carried, "So I informed him if he dislikes his compensation, he can leave and attempt his fortune driving for rideshare services. I have 20 additional resumes waiting." Laughter followed. Then one of the VPs, Meredith Chandler, added, "Half these people should appreciate we even permit them in the building." They all laughed again. Denise stood there, unseen. After a moment she departed, not with anger but with confirmation. The more she witnessed, the more she understood. This place wasn't merely damaged, it was corrupt. And they wouldn't change simply because someone requested it politely. They required replacement. She began planning quietly, piece by piece. She met with her attorney in a diner's back room off U.S. Highway 280, a man named Elliot Miles, discreet and straightforward. She handed him a flash drive. Inside were years of notes, photographs, recorded conversations, everything she'd documented since day one. Elliot remained silent for an extended period after reviewing it. Then he looked at her and said, "You realize once you proceed with this, it's going to shake that entire building." Denise nodded. "It's already shaking. They're simply unaware of it yet." He smiled. "I'll begin preparing paperwork." The strategy was simple. Let them walk directly into their own trap. Let them continue believing she was merely a custodian. Let them underestimate her once more. She wanted them confident, comfortable, because the fall always impacts harder when you never saw the edge. But sometimes even the most patient fire requires just one spark. And that spark was about to occur on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. It began with a paper plate. Denise had just completed cleaning the 3rd floor break room, wiping surfaces, removing trash, refilling the inexpensive powdered creamer they labeled premium. She was walking past the long conference corridor when she saw it, a half-consumed slice of birthday cake sitting directly in the hallway's center, fork protruding from it, chocolate smeared on the carpet. Someone had simply abandoned it there, not even on a table, just dropped it. She bent down slowly, not because it was challenging, but because something about that plate felt intentional, like someone did it just to observe her reaction. As she retrieved it, she heard the voice, "You overlooked the spot." It was Wexler standing at the hallway's end, hands in his pockets, smirking like a man with nothing to fear. She turned her head slightly. "Pardon me." He approached her slowly. "Right there," he said, indicating the floor beside where she'd just cleaned. "We're about to conduct a client presentation here. Think you can give the floor another cleaning before they arrive?" There was no spot, not even a mark. Denise stood up, cake plate in one hand, mop handle in the other. She remained silent. Wexler stared at her, then chuckled like she was part of some private joke. I swear sometimes I believe you people just pretend to clean so you can remain on the payroll. Her eyes narrowed briefly. What people is that? She inquired. He paused. Oh, come on, he said, laughing. Don't be so touchy. I'm just suggesting if I compensated you slightly more, maybe you'd locate the spots before I did. She blinked once, expressionless. Then she nodded. I'll ensure it's immaculate, she said. Wexler clapped his hands once. That's what I appreciate hearing. He walked away, proud of himself, believing he'd put her in her place. He had no idea. That evening, Denise didn't go directly home. She went to the Crestwell Records room, an area she had quiet access to after hours, thanks to a badge she borrowed from a manager who'd once left it on a sink. She'd kept it for months just in case. She moved quickly, pulled files, took photographs, emails, budget reports. Most importantly, she printed a bonus report from that same quarter. It showed Wexler had awarded himself a $55,000 performance bonus for operational excellence. Meanwhile, he'd cut employee meal allowances, reduced driver overtime rates, and frozen raises for custodial and warehouse staff. The final straw came the next morning. One of the janitors, Cynthia, came into the locker room crying. Her teenage son had been in a car accident, and she'd requested a day off to visit the hospital. Her request was denied. Denied, not enough coverage, they said. Denise sat there listening. Cynthia couldn't even complete a sentence through the tears. No one from the executive office cared. She was just a name on the schedule. Denise didn't speak, but she stood up, pulled her phone from her bag, and stepped outside. She called Elliot. It's time, she said. Are you certain? I'm certain. All right, he replied. It's going to be messy. I've been cleaning up messes my entire life, she said. Let's proceed. During the next 48 hours, Denise set the wheels in motion. She gave her lawyer the final evidence, made arrangements for a closed-door shareholder meeting, scheduled an emergency review under her legal rights as majority holder. The amusing thing was none of them noticed. Not even when she came in the next day wearing a new coat, a pressed blouse, and shoes that hadn't touched a mop in months. She walked past the front desk, didn't even glance at her old cart. She took the elevator to the 8th floor, straight to the boardroom. But what she had to say wouldn't just change her life. It would shatter everything they thought they knew about power. The boardroom at Crestwell Holdings had 12 leather chairs, one ridiculous chandelier, and a $14,000 custom table flown in from Seattle. Wexler once boasted about it being real walnut, like that was supposed to mean something to the janitors who cleaned gum from under it. At 10 a.m. sharp, the quarterly review began. Wexler stood at the table's head, arms crossed, tie loose, like he owned the oxygen in the room. To his left sat Meredith Chandler, his second in command. Next to her, Curtis Banning, the only man in the room who should have known what was coming, except he didn't. Denise walked in 5 minutes later, silent as a held breath. No mop, no gloves, just a navy blue blazer and a folder in her hand. Wexler frowned. I'm sorry, we're in a meeting. Maintenance is supposed to come through after hours. She didn't blink. I'm not here for maintenance. The room shifted. Meredith squinted at her. I'm sorry, do you have an appointment? I do, Denise said, walking slowly to the far end of the table. And I believe the shareholders were properly notified. That's when Elliot walked in behind her, briefcase in hand, calm as ever. Good morning, he said. My name is Elliot Miles, legal counsel for Mrs. Denise Jenkins, majority shareholder of Crestwell Holdings. Silence. Wexler's mouth opened, but no words came out. Denise laid the folder down on the table and opened it. Inside were signed partnership agreements from 1998, updated ownership documents, and a notarized letter transferring full voting rights to her upon Roland Jenkins's death. Curtis shifted in his seat like someone had pulled the rug out from under his feet. "No," he muttered. That can't be right." Denise turned to him. "You remember the contracts, Curtis. You helped write them." He didn't speak. She stepped forward, her voice calm and low. "For 15 years, I watched this place become unrecognizable. Watched you pad your bonuses, ignore safety violations, and punish employees for asking for basic decency." She looked straight at Wexler. "And I watched you turn my husband's company into a playground for your ego." Wexler tried to laugh it off. This is a misunderstanding. I don't know what kind of scam this is." "It's not a scam," Elliot interrupted. "All documents have been verified, and as of this moment, Mrs. Jenkins has called for a vote of no confidence in the current CEO. She has the authority to do so under the original shareholder agreement." Wexler stood up, both hands on the table. "You don't know what you're doing." Denise walked around the table slowly, looking each person in the eye. 15 years, she said. "You all looked past me like I wasn't even there. You let people suffer. You let this company rot. I gave you every chance to show some humanity." She paused at Wexler's chair. "And you failed." He turned red. "You think you can just walk in here and take over?" She leaned in. "I am the company." Elliot placed a small stack of letters in front of each board member. "Effective immediately, Mr. Thomas Wexler's contract is terminated. Security has been notified." Wexler's voice cracked. "You can't do this." Curtis muttered under his breath. "She already did." Security entered seconds later. They didn't say a word, just waited. Wexler looked around the room for backup, found none. He grabbed his phone, his pride, and stormed out, followed closely by Meredith, who suddenly remembered she had another meeting. Once the room cleared, Denise turned back to the board. "I'm not here to play boss," she said. "I'm here to rebuild what this place used to stand for." One of the younger board members, Jonas Evers, barely 30, raised his hand. "What exactly do you want to do first?" Denise smiled. "Start by listening to the people who've been ignored the longest." She closed the folder. "Change starts today. But just because you take out the garbage doesn't mean the house is clean." And Denise knew the real work was only beginning. The following Monday morning, Denise parked in the executive lot for the first time. She didn't like it, not because of the space. It was bigger, closer, covered from the rain. But something about that lot felt disconnected, like it had been reserved for people who didn't know what it meant to sweat. Still, she parked, walked in, head held high. She greeted the front desk receptionist by name. "Good morning, Tasha." The young woman blinked. "Miss Denise?" "It's just Denise now." She stepped into the elevator. No mop, no cleaning cart, just a notepad and a full calendar. By 9:30 a.m., she was in her office. New paint on the walls, same window view Wexler used to brag about. But she didn't spend much time looking out, too much to do inside. First thing she did, called a staff meeting. Not for the board, not for the executives, for the employees, drivers, admin staff, janitors, customer service reps, all invited. The room filled up quick. People looked confused, some suspicious. No one knew what to expect. Denise walked in, stood at the front. No microphone, just her voice. "I want to start by saying thank you," she began. "Most of you never knew who I was, and you didn't need to, because your work spoke louder than any title in this building." She paused. "I'm here to change things, but not by myself. I've spent years listening to your frustrations, your fears, your ideas, quietly. Now I want to hear them out loud." People started shifting in their chairs. It wasn't what they expected. A driver named Alonzo raised his hand. "Does this mean we get overtime back?" "Yes," Denise said. "And retro pay for the last 2 quarters. You'll see it on Friday's check." A woman from HR, Deborah, stood up. "And the health coverage? It's been getting worse every year." "We're already reviewing new providers," Denise said. "And every employee will get a survey to weigh in. No more backroom decisions about your well-being." There were no applause breaks, no over-the-top reactions, just silence, and then murmurs, people turning to each other like they were slowly realizing she was serious. Someone asked, "What about the people Wexler let go without cause?" "We're reviewing those terminations," she answered. "If you were wrongfully dismissed, you will be contacted. No guarantees, but you'll get your name cleared at the very least." Another voice from the back, "You're really the owner?" Denise smiled. "Always have been." She ended the meeting with a single promise. "If you speak, I will listen, and if you work, you'll be respected." After that, things didn't get easier. They got harder. The remaining executives didn't exactly welcome her with open arms. A few tried to block her decisions, arguing she didn't have the business background. One even questioned if she knew how to scale growth. Denise looked at him and said, "I scaled my grief into silence for 15 years. I think I can manage your spreadsheets." That shut him up. She brought in new department heads, promoted from within, people who had been overlooked for years. She changed vendor contracts, renegotiated warehouse leases, and brought back the annual Employee Appreciation Day that had mysteriously fallen out of budget years ago. She visited every single department, sat with them, ate lunch in the break room, listened, and slowly the building began to feel different. Not softer, just realer. One night, Cynthia, the janitor who'd cried over her son's accident, left a note in Denise's office. It said, "I didn't think anybody like us could ever make it to a place like that. You proved me wrong." Denise kept that note in her top drawer, but even after all the changes, one question kept coming up in whispers, and Denise knew she'd have to answer it. Why did she wait so long? It was a question she heard over and over. "Why'd you wait, Denise?" Some asked it with curiosity, others with doubt, a few with quiet resentment, like maybe she'd let it go too long. But Denise never got defensive. She'd just sit back in her chair, lace her fingers, and say the same thing every time. Because power only matters when you know how to use it. See, Denise didn't wait out of fear. She waited because the company needed to show who they were without her influence. She needed to see it with her own eyes, needed the rot to rise to the surface, because if she had stepped in too early, they would have said she overreacted. They would have gaslighted her, spun it like she was making noise about nothing. But 15 years of silence, that made her undeniable. She saw everything. She let it play out. And when the time came, she didn't argue. She just showed them the truth. And they folded under the weight of their own decisions. The janitor had become the witness and eventually the judge. One afternoon, she walked back into the same hallway where Wexler once pointed, at the spot she missed. Same carpet, same light. Except now it was spotless and no one dared talk down to her. An intern passed her in the hallway, slowed down, and said nervously, "Hi, Mrs. Jenkins." She smiled. "Just Denise." That afternoon, she hosted a small gathering for the staff in the company courtyard. No speeches, no banners, just food trucks and folding chairs and people laughing again. Alonzo, the driver, clinked his soda can against hers. "To the quiet ones," he said. Denise raised her can. to the ones they never saw coming. The lesson. It wasn't just about her ownership. It was about how easily we judge people by their uniforms, how quick we are to talk over someone holding a mop, how fast we are to assume value is tied to job titles in corner offices. Denise wasn't the exception. She was the reminder. People aren't invisible just because you stop looking at them. And sometimes the person sweeping the floor is the one who built the house. So if you work with someone you've never really talked to, maybe stop and say hello. You never know who's holding the keys to the whole building. If this story made you pause, even for a second, share it. Because somewhere right now, there's another Miss Denise getting overlooked, getting talked down to, getting erased. And maybe, just maybe, she's watching.